Tramway Engines is the 26th book of the Railway series and was first published in 1972. It was the last to be written by creator of the series, Wilbert Awdry, and the last to be illustrated by Mr. and Mrs. Peter Edwards. Over 15 years later, all 4 of its short stories were adapted into 4 short episodes of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. How faithful were these adaptations? Let's see if we can spot the differences. This book's first 2 stories were brought to model life in Series 2 of Thomas and Friends. When Percy tells Thomas and Toby about the ghost train, the 3 engines are next to a signal box. In the episode, the engines are at the quarry, though it is slightly hard to tell due to the excess fog and steam these shots contained.
Thomas didn't believe in your ghost,
said Percy next morning. His driver laughed.
Neither do I. It was a pretend ghost on television.
Percy was disappointed.
That night, Percy crashes into a cart full of lime powder. In the book, we are told the full story of how the cart came to be in the middle of the rails, but in the episode we do not meet Sam the farmer, though a behind-the-scenes photograph indicates that the horse and cart was to be switched with Terence the tractor. When Percy stops at the nearest signal box, Toby is there. In the book, Percy doesn't meet Toby until they are on their way back to the sheds. In the illustration for this scene, Percy's driver and fireman are also covered in lime, even though the signalman only comments on the engine's appearance. In the episode, Percy's crew were totally untouched by the powder.
Out with it, Toby. I can't wait all evening. I've just seen something,
said Toby.
It looked like Percy's ghost. It said it was coming here to warn us. Pooh, who cares? Don't be frightened, Toby. I'll take care of you.
The narration in the book claims that Percy glided through the shed and the doors were then shut by Toby's crew. It is uncertain, therefore, whether Percy entered the sheds from the back door or if he reversed in. Regardless of this, in the episode he does not enter the shed, though the doors do creak open. In this shot, most of the lime seems to have blown off Percy, but in the illustration he is still entirely white.
Let me in! Let me in!
Wailed Percy.
Not by the smoke of my chimney, chim. I'll chaff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in, oh!
In the episode, the final scene takes place at the station, but in the book it happens outside the sheds. Thomas runs off because he sees Percy coming. In the episode, he could not see Percy as he was coming up behind him, so he hears his whistle instead. Also, in the book's illustration, Thomas isn't pulling Annie or Clarabelle, and Daisy makes a cameo.
Anyone would think,
chuckled Toby,
that our Thomas had just seen a ghost.
The scene where Percy and Thomas argue takes place at the shunting yard, whereas in the book it was at Farquhar Sheds. Also, Toby is present in this page's illustration and clearly has a look of disdain on his face, though it is unclear whether it is directed at Grumpy Thomas or Cheeky Percy.
I'm a green caterpillar with red stripes.
The crate of treacle that falls onto Percy is a golden colour and covers his boiler and cab in the book. In the episode, the treacle is black and a large quantity of it lands on the green engine's face. It is up to Percy's driver and fireman to clear away the hay blocking the line, as none of the farmhands are shown to be around. However, they are still at work during this scene in the book, and so would likely have helped to clear the line. Although the narration stated on the previous page that the small engine was on his way home after the treacle incident, it appears Percy had come to collect more hay, hence why he was pulling empty trucks, which are absent in the episode.
Look what's crawled out of the hay,
teased Thomas.
What's wrong?
Gasped Percy.
Talk about hairy caterpillars,
puffed Thomas.
It's worth being late to have seen you.
Percy seems to be blushing with embarrassment in the story's final illustration. In the episode, he is instead very startled.
Bust my buffers. No wonder they all laughed. I'm just like a woolly bear.
Despite the book's title, only the final 2 stories take place on a tramway, nor was Toby that prominent a character in the first half of the book, and the book's cover girl, Mavis, is not introduced until the second half of stories. Said stories were not adapted until Series 3 of Thomas and Friends, 5 years after Series 2.
Trucks,
He grumbled.
should be where you want them, when you want them.
Mavis's response to Toby's advice is
Fiddlesticks.
in the episode, and
Fudge!
in the book. The line was possibly changed because it has stronger connotations of the F word than fiddlesticks. Mavis chats to Daisy, who convinces her that diesels are smarter than steam engines. In the episode, Mavis speaks to Devious Diesel instead.
Toby says only steam engines can manage trucks properly. What rubbish! Depend upon it, my dear. Anything steam engines do, we diesels can do better.
Also, the scene takes place at a shunting station, whereas in the book the 2 female diesels seem to be at the Farquhar sheds. The narrator explains how Toby tackles the tricky sloping lane in frosty weather before Mavis attempts to do it herself, without listening to the steam tram's advice. In the book, we are told how Toby manages it in between Mavis stopping at the bottom of the lane and finding that, thanks to the trucks, she is now stuck there.
Wailed Mavis.
Toby is at the quarry when he is informed about Mavis's predicament. In the book, he is outside the Farquhar sheds.
Having trouble, Mavis?
Chortled Toby.
I am surprised. Goof!
Said Mavis.
The story begins with Mavis being told off by the manager for causing the events of the previous story. In the episode, Percy takes the role of the manager, where he of course advises Mavis to take Toby's advice in future, rather than warn her to behave.
It's that Toby. He's a fussball. Toby has forgotten more about trucks than you will ever know.
Replied Percy.
The other main difference of the scene is that it takes place in winter, which makes more sense as the story is naturally supposed to take place just after the last one, though the illustrations in Mavis showed the ground to be more frosty than snowy. Mavis asks some trucks parked in a siding to push her down Toby's line. In the book, based on the illustration, she asks them while she is shunting them.
Can you keep a secret?
She asked the trucks.
Yes.
They chatted.
Toby's driver and fireman were apparently knocked over by the trucks pushing against him. This does not occur in the episode, as Toby's crew are clearly still standing in their cab. After he is secured via a chain wrapped around a dead tree, Mavis pulls Toby back onto firmer rails. In the book's illustrations, some men are also helping by tugging onto the chains strapped to the tram engine. On a side note, the narrator says that ropes were fastened to Toby, but illustrator Peter Edwards drew chains instead. In the final illustration, Toby is present as the Fat Controller visits Mavis, but he is absent in the episode.
I can't think how you managed to stop them in time. Oh well,
Said Toby.
my drivers told me about circus people who walk tightropes. I just didn't fancy doing it myself.